When humanity first stepped into the galaxy, nobody took them seriously. The great alien civilizations had been exploring the stars for thousands of years. Their ships moved faster than light. Their weapons could vaporize a mountain, and their governments stretched across hundreds of worlds. Then came humans, late arrivals, still new to space, still learning to survive beyond their own solar system. To the rest of the galaxy, humans looked like a struggling young species trying too hard to fit in. They spoke boldly, made promises of cooperation, and dreamed of building their own fleets. But when they arrived at the Galactic Trade Summit for the first time, every major species saw them as nothing more than a small curiosity, a civilization that would probably fade away in a few generations. The trade union's delegates smiled when they met the humans. They spoke politely, but behind those smiles was a quiet amusement. Humans were eager and almost desperate to prove themselves. They wanted ships, technology, and recognition, and the Union saw a perfect business opportunity. They offered to sell humanity a collection of old, decommissioned battleships. These vessels had once been proud symbols of war, but now they were nothing more than scrap. Their engines barely worked. Their hulls were corroded by centuries of radiation. The onboard computers were outdated, filled with viruses and failing circuits. The Union presented them as refurbished classic models, but everyone knew the truth. They were junk. Still, for humanity, it was a dream come true. They had been struggling to build their own interstellar navy, and the price of those rusted ships was just low enough to afford. Leaders back on Earth debated the deal for weeks. Some said it was a mistake. Others said it was the only chance to join the stars before being left behind forever. In the end, the decision was made. Earth would buy the fleet. When the ships arrived in orbit around the moon, people expected to see shining vessels from alien stories. Instead, they saw floating wrecks. Rust streaked the hulls like scars. Panels hung loose. Whole sections were missing. Even the engines sputtered weakly when tested. The disappointment was heavy. Some called it a scam. Others said it was proof that the galaxy didn't respect humans at all. But there were a few who didn't give up. Engineers, mechanics, and scientists gathered around those broken giants with wide eyes. They didn't see useless metal. They saw opportunity. Each dent told a story. Each malfunctioning system was a puzzle to solve. To them, it wasn't about pride. It was about learning, understanding, and improving. Human engineers began stripping the ships down, piece by piece. They removed entire decks, dug through tangled wiring, and took apart engines that hadn't run in centuries. They studied every circuit, every joint, every pattern of alien design. What one species had thrown away, humans decided to rebuild, and in their own way. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The shipyards buzzed with noise and life. Welders worked in zero gravity, sparks dancing around them like tiny stars. Teams of programmers stayed awake through long nights, rewriting software line by line. Scientists studied the alien materials, testing new alloys, discovering ways to strengthen the old hulls with Earth's own technology. There were accidents, of course. Systems overloaded. Hulls cracked under stress. Once, a power core exploded during testing, sending a shockwave through the entire facility. But every failure taught a lesson. Every mistake pushed them closer to success. Soon, the ships began to change. The dull, rusted plates were replaced with new metal forged on Mars. Solar collectors from Luna were added to power auxiliary systems. The outdated alien reactors were modified using human fusion technology. Smaller, simpler, and more stable. Engineers even rewired the control system so they could be operated manually if the computers failed. And when they finally ran their first full power test, the results shocked everyone. The old engines roared to life, brighter and stronger than before. The whole ship trembled, but it held steady. One by one, the other vessels followed. What had once been a pile of floating junk had turned into something entirely new, a fleet reborn. Still, the rest of the galaxy didn't care. They laughed when news spread that humans were flying around in recycled ships. They said humans were playing with toys while the real empires moved forward. But inside those ships, something powerful was growing, and pride, unity, and determination. The crews weren't just pilots and soldiers. They were builders, mechanics, and dreamers. They didn't care what others thought. They believed in what they had made with their own hands. The first real test came unexpectedly. A small human colony near the edge of explored space sent a distress call. Pirate raiders had arrived, ruthless scavengers armed with modern plasma weapons and fast attack cruisers. The colony had no defenses strong enough to fight back. The nearest alien patrol was days away. The human fleet, the so-called junkyard armada, was the only force close enough to respond. Many doubted they could help. Their ships were still considered outdated. Their weapons were primitive by galactic standards. But the fleet commander gave a simple order. We go. When the fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the colony, they faced a nightmare. Pirate ships swarmed the skies, bombarding settlements from orbit. Civilians were running for shelter. Communications were chaotic. The human ships locked into formation. Their weapons charged, old cannons that had been rebuilt and recalibrated by hand. The enemy laughed when they saw them appear, rusty, old war relics standing against. A fleet of modern predators, but laughter turned into silence the moment the first volley fired. Human gunners didn't rely on automated targeting. They aimed manually, calculating with instinct, experience, and sheer focus. Each shot was precise. The first plasma cruiser vanished in a blinding explosion. The second tried to flank, but human pilots trained through countless drills countered in perfect rhythm. The old ships moved like dancers in a storm, every motion deliberate and bold. The battle lasted only a few hours. When the smoke cleared, the pirates were gone, destroyed or fleeing. Not a single human ship had been lost. The colony was saved. The news spread faster than light itself. Across the galaxy, people began whispering about the humans who turned scrap into strength. Some didn't believe it. Others were simply confused. How could ships older than their grandparents outperform modern fleets? But to those who had fought that day, the answer was simple: human hands. It wasn't advanced technology that won the battle. It was grit, creativity, and a refusal to give up. The rusted ships might have been born from alien scrap, but their spirit was entirely human. When the fleet returned to Earth, they didn't arrive to parades or celebrations. They came back quietly, carrying stories of what they had seen. Yet everywhere they went, people looked at them differently. Children pointed at the sky, dreaming of one day joining the Rust Fleet. Engineers went back to their workshops with renewed fire. Scientists began new projects inspired by what was possible. Even the governments of the galaxy started to pay attention. Reports reached the trade union, the same people who had once laughed at humans. They reviewed the battle data and realized something terrifying. Those junk ships had performed better than their own models. Suddenly, the joke stopped. For the first time, humanity wasn't seen as a beginner. They were seen as unpredictable, a species that could take broken things and make them stronger than before. And deep inside the shipyards of Mars, something new was already being built. Engineers worked in silence, inspired by everything they had learned from the rusted fleet. They had bigger plans, stronger armor, faster drives, new hybrid reactors. They weren't fixing alien ships anymore. They were building something of their own, something that would make the galaxy remember who humans really were. At that moment, nobody knew how much the galaxy was about to change. The aliens had sold humans their rusted battleships thinking they were fooling them. But in truth, they had given them something far greater, the foundation of a new era. Because for humanity, every scrap of metal carried a lesson. Every failure held a spark of progress. And every insult, every laugh, every moment of being underestimated, one was fuel. The stars had mocked them once. Soon, those same stars would echo with the sound of human engines, and the name that would one day strike awe and respect across the galaxy, the Dreadnought. After the victory at the colony, everything changed for humanity. For the first time, the galaxy had seen what humans were capable of. The same people who were once mocked for buying junk ships were now being talked about in every alien news network. Some called it luck, others called it bravery. But to those who had lived through the chaos, it was something deeper. It was proof that humans didn't need perfection to win. They only needed determination. Still, while the galaxy whispered, humanity didn't stop working. The engineers, mechanics, and scientists who had rebuilt the rusted fleet came back to their shipyards with more fire in their hearts than ever before. They had tasted success, but they knew it was only the beginning. Back on Mars, the great domed cities glowed red under the thin atmosphere. Inside massive hangars, teams of builders worked day and night. The smell of metal and welding sparks filled the air, Every screw, every panel, every beam was placed with care. People from Earth, Luna, and the colonies worked side by side, sharing ideas, arguing over designs, pushing each other forward. They wanted to prove something not just to the galaxy, but to themselves. They wanted to build a ship that wasn't borrowed or repaired, but created from the ground up by human hands. Something that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the best fleets in the universe. They studied every alien design they had ever seen. They took what worked and discarded what didn't. But instead of copying, they improved. They thought differently. Not like the old species who had been building the same kind of ships for thousands of years, but like problem solvers, inventors, and dreamers. There was one engineer who stood up during a meeting and said, "We've always been patching their mistakes. What if we make something so strong that it doesn't need fixing at all?" The room fell silent for a moment. Everyone knew what he meant. Humanity was ready to create something entirely new, and so the idea of the Dreadnought project was born. It started as a dream, a design so big and ambitious that most thought it was impossible. The ship would be larger than any vessel humans had ever built. It would have armor thicker than any known material, engines that could move mountains, and weapons that didn't just copy alien technology, but redefined it. The government hesitated at first. The cost was enormous, and no one knew if the plan would even work. But the people didn't care. Crowdfunding began on Earth and spread through every colony. Children donated their savings. Retired workers sent parts, metals, and old tools. Everyone wanted to be part of the Dreadnought. It became more than just a ship. It became a symbol of hope. A symbol of what humans could do when the universe doubted them. The construction began in orbit above Mars. From a distance, it looked like a small moon, a massive ring of scaffolding surrounding a growing metal giant. Shuttles flew back and forth carrying supplies, engineers, and welders. Drones buzzed around like fireflies, helping with the heavy lifting. The sound of machines echoed across the vacuum, transmitted through radio, a rhythm that felt almost alive. The Dreadnought's frame grew slowly but steadily. Its core was built from alloys that no other species used, materials that could only be produced in human furnaces, using techniques that alien factories had long forgotten. Humans didn't care if it took longer or cost more. They weren't building for convenience. They were building for endurance. Months turned into years. The galaxy watched from afar, curious and doubtful. Alien commentators joked that humans were building a floating brick. Some claimed the project was already falling apart. A few even sent offers to help, pretending to be generous, but everyone knew they were just trying to spy on the design. Humanity politely declined. Inside the shipyards, the work never stopped. Every day brought new challenges. One week, the fuel lines failed under pressure. The next, the shield generator wouldn't synchronize. There were arguments, setbacks, even moments when everyone thought it might be impossible. But then someone would find a solution, and a small tweak, a clever trick, and suddenly the problem was solved. That was humanity's secret weapon. Where others gave up, humans adapted. By the third year, the Dreadnought's full shape began to appear. It was breathtaking and not sleek or elegant like alien ships, but bold, powerful, and full of character. Its design looked like it had been forged by a species that had fought through storms and survived. Thick armor plates layered across the hull like muscles. Gigantic cannons sat along its sides, each capable of firing projectiles faster than light. It wasn't just a ship. It was a message, a reminder that strength didn't come from perfection but from perseverance. When the internal systems were finally powered for the first time, everyone held their breath. The ship's lights flickered, then stabilized. Generators hummed. The bridge screens came alive with data. The Dreadnought had taken its first breath. People cheered across every human world. The moment was broadcast live. Millions watched as the massive ship turned slowly against the black backdrop of space, its silver surface gleaming like dawn after a long night, but the galaxy wasn't ready for what came next. The trade union, the same group that had once sold humans their rusted battleships, sent a team to inspect the ship under the excuse of a diplomatic visit. When they arrived, their smiles were polite, but their eyes were calculating. They expected to see a crude experiment, a clumsy human attempt at a warship. Instead, they saw something that made them speechless. The Dreadnought wasn't just operational. It was alive with power. Its systems responded instantly. Its reactors burned clean and strong, and its internal gravity fields were perfectly balanced. The alien inspectors quietly recorded everything they saw, trying to hide their shock. The ship's main cannon alone was something no one had seen before. A weapon that didn't use energy beams or plasma, but magnetically accelerated slugs that could pierce through anything known to exist. When the inspection ended, the alien leader said softly, "This ship should not be possible." The human engineers smiled. "That's what you said about us too." The Dreadnought wasn't just an engineering miracle, it was a cultural one. It brought humanity together like never before. Old rivalries between nations faded. Colonies that once competed now shared resources. The Dreadnought became a living symbol of unity, a ship that belonged to all of humanity. And when it was finally time for the first test flight, the excitement was beyond words. Crowds gathered in cities across Earth and Mars. Children held small flags. Families stayed up all night to watch the broadcast. Every screen, every radio, every communication channel was tuned in. Then slowly the Dreadnought moved. The engines ignited with a deep, thunderous hum that echoed through the void. The entire shipyard trembled as the ship lifted from its dock. The glowing trails behind it stretched for miles, painting the darkness with light. It wasn't just a ship leaving port. It was humanity itself taking a step into history. When it broke through the Martian orbit, everyone watching cheered. The Dreadnought systems held perfectly. The new drive worked better than predicted. For the first time, humans had built something that surpassed alien technology. The news spread faster than light again. Galactic channels broadcast it for weeks. Some alien empires congratulated humans. Others grew silent, realizing that something fundamental had shifted. Humanity was no longer a student in the stars. They were becoming a leader. Back on the Dreadnought's bridge, the crew looked out into the infinite dark. They knew they had made something greater than themselves. This ship was proof that humans could rise from nothing and create something that even ancient empires would respect. One of the engineers said quietly, "Do you think they'll ever see us the same way again?" The captain looked out the window, watching the reflection of Earth far in the distance. "No," he said, "and that's exactly the point." The Dreadnought continued its slow journey through the void, heading for its next destination, the joint galactic military trials, where fleets from across the stars would demonstrate their power. No one expected the human ship to stand out. No one imagined what was coming. For now, though, humanity celebrated. People danced in streets, fireworks lit up the skies, and everywhere across Earth, Mars, and the colonies. One message echoed through every home. "We built this together." The aliens had once sold humans rusted battleships, thinking they were giving them scrap. But in truth, they had given humanity something far more valuable, the motivation to rise, to learn, and to create. And as the Dreadnought's engines roared through the endless night, one thing became clear. The days of underestimating Earth were over. Because from that moment on, the galaxy would never forget the species that turned junk into power, and power into legend. The Dreadnought's first flight had already made history, but what came next would decide everything. Humanity had proven it could build something powerful. Now they had to prove it could stand among the galaxy's greatest fleets. Not long after the test flight, an official invitation arrived from the Galactic Union. It was a formal document sealed with dozens of alien symbols and signatures. The message was clear. Humanity was invited to join the upcoming joint military trials, an event where the strongest navies from across the galaxy demonstrated their technology, strategy, and discipline. For generations, only the most advanced civilizations had ever been part of those trials. It was an event that defined respect and rank in the stars. And now, for the first time, humans had a place at that table. When the announcement reached Earth and the colonies, the reaction was explosive. News anchors couldn't stop talking about it. People argued in cafes, schools, and offices about whether humanity was ready. Some believed the invitation was genuine, a sign of respect. Others thought it was a trap, a way for the aliens to humiliate humans in front of everyone. In truth, they were partly right. Many alien leaders wanted to remind humans of their place. They hadn't forgotten that Earth had once bought scrap from them. They wanted to see the rust builders stumble. But humanity had no fear. They had built the Dreadnought not to show off, but to prove that their spirit was unbreakable. The day before departure, The Dreadnought floated quietly above Mars, glowing softly in orbit. Inside, engineers and crew members moved with calm focus. Every console was checked, every system tested. On the observation deck, a few stood silently, looking out at the red planet below. They knew that tomorrow the whole galaxy would be watching them. Finally, the moment arrived. With a deep hum, the Dreadnought's engines came to life, and the massive ship began its journey to the Union's central arena, a vast space zone where hundreds of warships from every corner of the galaxy gathered. When the Dreadnought arrived, the sight was overwhelming. Gigantic alien battleships drifted like mountains in the dark. Sleek cruisers shimmered with bright blue lights. There were ships shaped like wings, spheres, even transparent crystals that bent light around them. Compared to those, the Dreadnought looked simple, heavy, metallic, and raw. But while other ships sparkled like jewelry, the Dreadnought looked alive, like a creature forged in fire and determination. The moment the human ship entered the field, whispers spread across communication channels. Is that the human vessel? They actually built it themselves? It looks ancient. From their observation stations, alien commanders watched carefully. Some smiled in amusement. Others frowned in suspicion. But no one ignored it. The trials began with standard exercises, navigation, maneuvering, and communication tests. Every fleet had to move through asteroid belts, simulate combat formations, and respond to emergency drills. When the human fleet's turn came, most spectators expected clumsy performance. But as soon as the Dreadnought entered the asteroid field, something unexpected happened. Instead of using autopilot like the others, the human pilots chose to control manually. They read the rock's movements, adjusted engines by instinct, and navigated through paths that no computer would dare to calculate. Watching from afar, alien commanders couldn't believe their eyes. A massive ship moving with the precision of a dancer, avoiding every collision with effortless grace. When the Dreadnought exited the asteroid field without a single scratch, a wave of murmurs filled the control halls. Humans had passed the first test flawlessly. The second trial was speed. Fleets had to travel through a simulated warp corridor, maintaining stability and synchronization. Most ships relied on automated drives for perfect balance. Humans once again used a mix of manual and computer control. And though their engines weren't the fastest, their flight remained the smoothest. Their energy consumption was lower than expected. Their systems perfectly balanced. Every small success silenced more doubters. But the final trial, the combat simulation, was what everyone had been waiting for. Each civilization had to send one ship to face a simulated enemy fleet designed to test defense, accuracy, and endurance. Most species treated it as a game. They knew the drills. They had practiced them for decades. When humanity's turn came, the galaxy held its breath. The Dreadnought moved into the simulation zone, an enormous arena surrounded by floating cameras, drones, and observation ships. The enemy fleet appeared on sensors, 50 automated drones equipped with advanced plasma weapons, programmed to fight like a real army. The challenge was to last 10 minutes without being destroyed. Alien leaders whispered among themselves. Let's see how long the humans last. They'll be gone in 2 minutes. But inside the Dreadnought, the crew wasn't nervous. They had lived for this moment. Every part of that ship had been tested, repaired, and built by their own hands. They knew its limits, and they trusted it like family. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The drones attacked first, firing beams of light across the darkness. The Dreadnought's shields flared, a bright blue shimmer lighting the void. The whole ship shook, but it held firm. The crew reacted instantly. Manual targeting systems activated. Human hands moved over the controls. Then the cannons fired. Unlike alien energy weapons, human railguns used kinetic power, pure force. The projectiles flew faster than light and hit like thunder. One drone exploded, then another. The recoil echoed through the ship, shaking the floor, but no one flinched. The alien spectators leaned closer. Those are projectile weapons? No one uses those anymore. And yet they worked. Perfectly. The Dreadnought moved slowly but deliberately. Every turn, every shot was precise. Where other ships relied on pre-programmed tactics, humans relied on creativity. When the drones adapted their strategy, The crew changed theirs instantly. They didn't fight like machines and they fought like thinkers. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Then 20. When the last drone finally went dark, the timer still hadn't stopped. The Dreadnought had survived, and then not just survived, it had won. The crowd watching across the galaxy fell silent. Then one by one, messages of disbelief began flooding the network. The simulation had been designed to be unbeatable. No ship had ever cleared it completely. Until now. In the control chamber, the alien judges didn't know what to say. Their systems confirmed it. All targets neutralized, minimal damage taken, stable power levels throughout. The human ship had achieved the impossible. Back aboard the Dreadnought, the crew sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then slowly smiles began to appear. Laughter followed. Some clapped, others hugged, unable to believe what they had just done. From Earth to Mars, celebrations erupted again. Streets filled with music and lights. Every screen replayed the moment when the Dreadnought's final cannon fired. Children stared in wonder, whispering, "That's our ship." But while humans celebrated, the rest of the galaxy began to feel something new. Unease. For centuries, the old empires had seen themselves as untouchable. They believed their knowledge was perfect, their designs flawless. Yet in less than a decade, a young species from a small blue planet had done what they could not. Some alien admirals tried to downplay the result. It was luck, they said. The simulation wasn't fair. But deep inside, they knew it wasn't luck. It was the same stubborn creativity that had turned rusted ships into legends. At the closing ceremony of the trials, every fleet lined up in formation. The Dreadnought floated quietly at the edge, its hull still scarred from the test but shining under the starlight. When the results were announced, the Dreadnought was ranked first in overall performance, the best efficiency, endurance, and tactical response ever recorded. For a long moment, there was silence. Then the representatives of the Galactic Union stood and bowed, not out of pity, not out of politics, but out of genuine respect. In that single gesture, history turned. The same galaxy that once sold humanity rusted scrap now bowed before what humans had created. On the bridge of the Dreadnought, the captain looked out at the stars. The crew was still cheering, their voices echoing through the corridors, but his expression was calm. "This isn't the end," he said softly. "It's the beginning. They'll never underestimate us again." And as the Dreadnought drifted slowly away from the arena, its engines lighting up like a new sunrise, the universe watched in silence. A new power had risen, not born from greed or conquest, but from human persistence, unity, and hope. The ship that had been built by human hands from rust and faith now carried a message across the stars, Mar, a message no one would ever forget. You can sell us your broken things. You can laugh at our weakness. But one day we'll make something so strong even you will bow to it. After the Dreadnought's victory at the Galactic trials, everything changed. For the first time in history, humanity wasn't seen as the newcomer species anymore. They had gone from being laughed at to being respected, even feared. Across the galaxy, news networks replayed the footage of that massive ship standing alone in the dark, surrounded by silence after destroying every simulation target. The commentators struggled to explain it. The engineers of other species refused to believe it, and yet, the proof was undeniable. Back on Earth, celebrations continued for weeks. Cities lit up in blue and silver to honor the Dreadnought. Children in schools drew pictures of the great ship and called it the pride of humanity. On Mars and Luna, colonies held their own parades. The ship's crew became heroes overnight, but none of them saw themselves that way. They all said the same thing, and it wasn't about fame. It was about proving that humans belonged among the stars. But while the people rejoiced, the leaders of Earth were busy. Something had shifted in the balance of power, and they knew it. For centuries, the galaxy had been dominated by the same few empires, civilizations that had long stopped growing, long stopped improving. They had technology, but they had lost hunger. Humanity was different. Their hunger was endless. Inside the orbital shipyards above Mars, work began again almost immediately. The Dreadnought was still in orbit, its hull glowing faintly from the light of the sun. Engineers, scientists, and soldiers gathered in the observation decks, staring at the ship in silence. They had built it from nothing, from scraps of alien rust. And now they were ready for something bigger. The project that followed wasn't about one ship. It was about a fleet. The engineers who had worked on the Dreadnought gathered in massive conference halls, their faces lit by holographic screens showing design after design. They discussed new weapon systems, stronger shields, faster engines. The goal wasn't just to match alien powers anymore. It was to surpass them completely. And so began what people later called the Great Expansion. Every human colony with a factory, a dock, or even a mining rig was asked to contribute. The response was overwhelming. Cargo ships brought metals from the asteroid belt, reactors from lunar bases, and energy cells from deep space stations. Civilians volunteered to help. Mechanics who had worked on small freighters now stood alongside scientists who designed reactors. Everyone wanted to be part of the new fleet. It wasn't just about power. It was about unity. Humanity had never been this united before. On Earth, old rivalries between nations faded. People stopped talking about who came from where and started saying, "We are all from Earth." As the months passed, the shipyards transformed. What had once been a quiet industrial area turned into a city in space, glowing lights stretching across the orbit of Mars, forming a ring visible from the ground. From below, it looked like a second sunrise. The Dreadnought itself was used as the command center. Inside, the crew worked tirelessly, training new recruits and testing new systems. The atmosphere was a mix of exhaustion and pride. No one complained, even during endless shifts. Everyone knew they were building something that would define generations. Meanwhile, the alien powers were watching closely. Some sent diplomats with carefully worded offers of cooperation. Others sent spies trying to gather information. But humans were cautious. They remembered how easily they had been deceived in the past. Every offer of friendship came with hidden intentions, and humanity wasn't ready to trust again so easily. In one corner of the galaxy, a council of alien admirals met to discuss what they called the human problem. They debated for hours. Some wanted to open trade, some wanted to restrict it, and a few quietly suggested that humans should be contained. But even they knew it was too late. Humanity's momentum couldn't be stopped. Back on Mars, the first new ship of the fleet was completed. It was smaller than the original Dreadnought, but faster and more agile. The hull shone with deep gray metal that reflected the light of distant stars. When it powered up for the first time, the entire shipyard fell silent. The engines glowed with a deep blue fire, clean, steady, perfect. The crowd watching from the observation decks broke into applause. Soon, another ship followed. Then another. Within 2 years, humanity had built a fleet of 5 Dreadnought-class vessels and dozens of support cruisers. Each one carried a name that represented the spirit of Earth: unity, courage, horizon, dawn, and legacy. The galaxy began to realize that this was no longer an isolated event. It was a transformation. Trade routes that once ignored Earth now depended on it. Human engineers were being requested by other civilizations. Even alien universities started studying human designs, trying to understand how a species so young had achieved so much so fast. Yet, even with all this recognition, humanity stayed humble. The Dreadnought fleet wasn't built to conquer or threaten. It was built to protect, to stand as a reminder that strength could come from perseverance, not arrogance. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. A neighboring system sent a distress signal. It wasn't human. It was from one of the very same species that had once mocked Earth. Their outpost was under attack by a swarm of rogue machines that had gone out of control. The nearby alien fleets were too far away to respond in time. The Human Council met quickly. The decision was made without hesitation. The Dreadnought fleet would go. When the human ships arrived at the edge of that system, the scene was chaotic. The outpost defense grid was collapsing. The alien civilians were evacuating, terrified. From orbit, their cities looked like small sparks fading in the dark. The human fleet didn't wait for orders. They formed a protective line, activating their shields. The Dreadnoughts positioned themselves between the attackers and the helpless colony. The alien command center sent a message, their voices shaking with disbelief. "You came to help us?" The human commander's reply was calm. "We remember what it feels like to be left behind." The Dreadnoughts advanced, and their presence alone changed everything. The rogue machines shifted focus, targeting the human ships. The sky above the planet glowed as the Dreadnoughts held their line. The battle lasted hours, but when it ended, the machines were gone, and the colony was safe. When the alien leaders finally came out to meet the humans, their expressions were filled with something new. Not arrogance, not pride, but gratitude. They realized that the species they once looked down upon had just saved their people. In the days that followed, the story spread across the galaxy. The headlines were simple but powerful. Humans save a world. From that moment on, everything changed again. The word human began to mean something different. It meant resilience, courage, and compassion. Soon after, the Galactic Union invited humanity to take a seat on the High Council, a position once considered impossible for a young race. When the human representative entered the Grand Hall, every species turned to watch. Some bowed their heads. Others remained quiet, still processing the weight of what had happened. And sitting at the center of the hall was the same trade union representative who, years ago, had sold Earth those rusted battleships. The alien's eyes flickered with emotion, a mix of shame and awe. As the human representative took their seat, the alien slowly stood and gave a respectful nod. It wasn't just a political gesture. It was an acknowledgement of truth. The galaxy had underestimated humanity. Now it was clear that mistake would never happen again. In the shipyards above Mars, the Dreadnought fleet rested in silence. Their metal hulls gleamed against the starlight, each one a reminder of how far humans had come. The workers who had built them stood side by side, watching their creations drift peacefully among the stars. They had started with nothing, just rust, scraps, and laughter from those who doubted them. And now, the same galaxy that once mocked them now bowed in respect. Somewhere deep inside the Dreadnought's bridge, an old engineer sat quietly, staring out at the vastness of space. He smiled to himself and whispered, "We were never meant to fit into their world. We were meant to build our own." The stars outside twinkled softly, almost as if they were listening, and as the Dreadnought's engines powered down for the night, one thing became clear. This wasn't the end of the story. Humanity's journey had only just begun. After humanity's victory and their heroic rescue of the alien colony, the galaxy saw Earth in a completely new light. For centuries, humans had been treated like apprentices in a universe run by ancient empires. But now those same empires were reaching out with trembling hands, asking for friendship and alliance. It was strange how quickly things changed. The same species that once sold Earth-broken ships now sent invitations covered in gold, calling humanity our honored allies. Alien fleets that had once ignored human signals now opened communication lines every day. Diplomatic shuttles began arriving at Earth's orbit, glowing with bright lights and carrying representatives from across the stars. In the Great Hall of the United Earth Council, the atmosphere was electric. Delegates from Mars, Luna, and dozens of colonies gathered alongside scientists, admirals, and engineers. The room buzzed with energy as holograms of alien ambassadors appeared one by one, offering trade, peace, and cooperation. But behind the polite smiles and kind words, there was unease. Humanity had worked too hard to reach this point. They had seen how greed and pride ruled the galaxy. They couldn't afford to make the same mistakes. One of the senior commanders of the Dreadnought fleet stood before the council and said in a calm voice, "Power without control destroys. We can't let praise make us blind." The room went silent. Everyone understood what he meant. Humanity was no longer the student, but that didn't mean they were ready to become the teacher. Outside the council chambers, life on Earth had changed too. Spaceports that once handled a few small shuttles were now crowded with alien visitors. Strange ships floated above the cities, their shapes glowing like floating art. Markets were filled with goods from distant worlds, crystals that glowed when touched, fabrics that could change color, spices that filled the air with sweet warmth. For ordinary people, it felt like a dream. But not everyone was comfortable. Some humans whispered that aliens were only pretending to be friendly, that they feared humanity's power and wanted to control it through soft words instead of war. Others believed this was humanity's time to lead, to become the center of a new galactic age. Meanwhile, up in orbit, the Dreadnought fleet continued to grow. The shipyards around Mars had expanded to twice their original size. From the surface, you could see the shining trails of construction drones weaving around massive steel frames. Each new ship was larger and more advanced than the last. Engineers had begun experimenting with hybrid technology, mixing alien systems with human designs. What once took decades to develop now happened in months. Inside one of the ships under construction, a group of engineers worked late into the night. Their faces were tired, hands dirty with metallic dust, but their eyes shone with pride. They knew they weren't just building ships, they were building history. One of them looked out the observation window at the stars and said softly, "Do you ever think about how it all started? We were mocked for buying rusted ships, and now look at us, they bow before us." The others smiled quietly. It was true. The galaxy had underestimated humanity. And now, every bolt, every wire, every plate of metal carried that memory, the memory of how far they had come. But success always brings attention. Far across the galaxy, not everyone was pleased. In the dark corners of space, some old powers whispered that humans were growing too fast. They feared Earth's rise, and fear often breeds hatred. Spies began to move again, hiding in trade ships collecting information. Some alien empires started gathering fleets, and not openly for war, but for defense exercises. Everyone knew what that meant. The Human Council knew it too. During one late-night meeting, the discussion turned serious. The holographic map of the galaxy floated in the center of the room, filled with red and blue lights representing different territories. A strategist pointed to several systems on the edge of known space and said, "They're moving ships closer every week. They say it's for training, but we all know better." The room was silent for a moment. Then the fleet commander stood up and said, "Then we prepare. Not for war, but for survival." And so preparation began. The Dreadnoughts were upgraded again, equipped with new energy cores, faster jump drives, and shield systems that could protect entire fleets. But even then, the humans didn't become arrogant. They remembered their beginnings, the rusted hulls, the laughter of those who mocked them. That memory kept them grounded. On Earth, a message went out to every colony, every ship, every outpost. It was simple: stay ready, stay united. Meanwhile, something else was happening, something even more powerful than fleets or weapons. Humanity was changing on the inside. The old divisions that once separated people, language, borders, and politics, were fading. The dream of unity was no longer just a slogan. People began to feel it in their bones. They didn't see themselves as nations anymore. They saw themselves as one species under one sky. That realization gave them strength no technology could replace. In schools, children learned not only Earth's history but also the stories of alien worlds. On Mars, a group of alien children attended a human academy for the first time. At first they were shy, but soon they were laughing and playing with human kids as if there were no difference at all. It was small moments like these that showed how much the universe was changing, but peace never lasts forever. One evening, a faint signal reached Earth from deep space, a distress call. It came from a human mining outpost near the outer rim, far beyond known safe zones. The transmission was broken and filled with static, but the words were clear enough to send chills down every spine. Unknown ships. Heavy fire. They're not pirates. Within minutes, the Dreadnought fleet was mobilized. Orders went out to every shipyard and base. Engines roared to life, and the fleet assembled near Mars. The night sky above the red planet glowed with blue and white light as massive ships aligned into formation. Inside the command deck of the lead Dreadnought, tension was thick. The crew knew this mission could change everything again. They weren't just defending an outpost. They were defending the reputation humanity had built. When the fleet reached the edge of the system, the truth became clear. The attackers weren't pirates. They were warships from one of the older alien empires, the same empire that had mocked humanity for decades. The same one that now feared them. The alien ships were massive, hundreds of them moving like a dark storm through the stars. Their commander sent a single message across open space. "You grew too fast. It's time you remember your place." For a few moments, silence hung in the void. Then the human commander replied, voice steady and cold. "We built our place, and we earned it." The battle that followed was unlike anything seen before. The alien fleet had numbers, but the humans had something more powerful: unity and belief. The Dreadnoughts fought side by side, protecting each other like brothers and sisters. Their cannons lit up the darkness, each shot echoing with the weight of Earth's journey. When the dust settled, the stars were quiet again. The alien fleet was gone. The Dreadnought stood victorious and damaged, scarred but unbroken. Word spread across the galaxy in hours. Every news channel, every communication relay carried the same story. Humans defend against galactic power and win. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't just lucky. They were strong enough to stand alone. In the aftermath, even the most powerful empires began to rethink their place. Some sent envoys to apologize. Others sent gifts. But a few, the wisest among them, sent something far more valuable: respect. Back on Earth, the people celebrated not with pride, but with quiet gratitude. They knew what it had cost, and the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the fear. But they also knew something deeper. Humanity had finally proven it didn't need to borrow greatness. It could build it from nothing. In the following weeks, when the Dreadnought fleet returned home, they were greeted not with parades or fireworks, but with silence. A respectful silence filled with awe. Families gathered at the viewing decks, watching as the ships slowly entered orbit. Some wept, some smiled. Everyone felt the same thing: pride in being human. The commander of the fleet stood before the crowd and said simply, "They once sold us rust. Now they bow before steel." Those words spread across every corner of the galaxy. They weren't a threat. They were a reminder that strength doesn't come from what you buy, but from what you build. And as the dreadnoughts drifted in orbit, shining softly in the starlight, it became clear that the galaxy had changed forever. The age of human weakness was over. The era of human unity had begun. The Dreadnought fleet's victory spread like fire across the stars. Everywhere, beings of all kinds spoke of humans with awe. The story of how a once-ignored species had stood up to an ancient empire and won was told in marketplaces, in schools, even in the quiet corners of space stations. Humanity was no longer just a member of the galaxy. It had become its heartbeat. But even as praise poured in, humanity remained cautious. They knew that respect could turn to fear in an instant. So instead of celebrating endlessly, they began to build something new. Not another weapon, but a vision. The United Earth Council called it the Galactic Peace Initiative. The idea was simple yet powerful: to create an alliance not ruled by power or wealth, but by cooperation and fairness. They didn't want to become what they had once despised, arrogant and controlling. They wanted to be better. At first, many alien empires were skeptical. Some believed it was just a way for humans to expand their influence under the mask of peace. Others simply didn't trust the idea. But slowly, the sincerity of humanity's actions began to show. Instead of demanding tribute or control, humans sent aid ships to planets still recovering from wars. They shared food, medicine, and technology freely, asking for nothing in return. On one distant planet scarred by drought, a human relief fleet landed quietly. They didn't make speeches or demand gratitude. They just got to work. They built water stations, taught the locals how to repair broken machines, and stayed until the crops grew again. For the first time, that planet's people realized humans didn't come to take. They came to help. Stories like these spread faster than any fleet could travel. Soon, one by one, other species began joining the Peace Initiative. What started as a small dream on Earth turned into something far greater: a true alliance of worlds. But as peace grew, so did responsibility. Human leaders felt the weight of expectation. Every decision they made echoed across hundreds of systems. They were no longer speaking for one planet. They were speaking for billions. Some nights, the council chambers stayed lit until dawn, filled with quiet arguments about how to balance power and kindness. One commander said during a late meeting, "We built the dreadnoughts to protect, not to rule. Let's not forget that." Those words became a guiding principle. While fleets guarded the borders of allied systems, human diplomats worked tirelessly to settle disputes between rival species. Many times they succeeded simply because they listened, something rare in galactic politics. They listened to the pain of others, to the old wounds that had never healed, and little by little trust began to grow where there had once been only suspicion. But peace was never perfect. In the shadows, some old powers still plotted. A group of leaders from the defeated empire had fled into deep space. They hid in forgotten stations, angry and humiliated. They refused to accept a galaxy led by humans and began to rebuild their forces in secret. Months later, strange attacks began happening near the border regions. Small colonies went dark, trade convoys vanished, and communication relays stopped transmitting. At first, people thought it was pirates again, but the patterns were too precise, too organized. The Council knew someone was trying to ignite war again. When word reached the Dreadnought fleet, there was no hesitation. The humans didn't respond with rage, but with calm resolve. They had faced hatred before. They knew how dangerous it was. This time, though, humanity had allies. When the emergency call went out, fleets from several alien nations answered, ships flying different flags but fighting under one purpose. For the first time in history, a united force of humans and aliens stood side by side, ready to defend peace. The battle that followed was fierce but short. The Hidden Empire's forces were no match for a galaxy that finally stood together. Their ships burned like falling stars, their arrogance crushed under the weight of unity. When it was over, no one cheered. There was no victory parade, just quiet relief. People understood now, peace wasn't something you won once. It was something you had to keep building every single day. After the battle, the leaders of the Peace Initiative gathered on a vast station orbiting a golden star. It was the largest meeting ever held. Thousands of species, from the smallest insect-like beings to towering crystal giants, all seated together in one hall. When the human representative took the stage, the room went completely silent. Everyone waited to hear what Earth would say next. He looked around slowly, his voice calm but full of emotion. We came into this galaxy as outsiders. You called our ships rust, our weapons toys, our people naive. And maybe you were right back then. But we didn't give up. We learned, we grew, and we built something from nothing. But more than power, what we found was purpose. We learned that strength means nothing if it doesn't protect others. The hall was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, representatives from other worlds began to stand. Not to argue, not to protest, but to bow their heads in respect. It wasn't a victory for humans alone. It was a victory for everyone who believed in change. From that day forward, the Dreadnoughts were no longer called warships. They became known as guardians. They were not a symbol of fear, but of safety. Each one was stationed near vulnerable systems not to control them, but to protect them. Their presence meant stability, a promise that no world would be abandoned again. Back on Earth, the shipyards finally quieted. After decades of constant construction, the sounds of welding and engines faded. For the first time in a long time, people rested. The old engineer who had helped design the first Dreadnought often sat on a balcony overlooking the sea. He would watch the sunset and smile, remembering how it all began. The rusted ships, the mockery, the struggle. Sometimes young students would visit him, asking questions about those early days. He always told them the same thing. Don't chase greatness. Build it slowly. Let your work speak for you. Across the solar system, humanity's colonies flourished. Mars had become a world of green valleys and shining cities. Luna was no longer a barren rock, and it was home to millions. And beyond Pluto's orbit, explorers continued pushing outward, seeking new stars, new homes. But despite all the expansion, humanity never forgot the lessons of the past. Every new ship carried a small plate engraved with the same words, "From rust we rose." Generations later, those words became a proverb repeated across hundreds of planets, even by species who had never seen Earth. It reminded everyone that even the smallest beginning could lead to greatness if one had courage and unity. Over time, humans stopped being seen as the newcomers. Instead, they became the mediators, the peacemakers, the voice of reason in a galaxy full of pride and rivalry. When two alien empires clashed, they didn't call their old allies for help. They called Earth. And each time, the humans came, not with fleets or threats, but with open hands and steady hearts. The Dreadnought still sailed among the stars, their massive forms gliding through the darkness like silent guardians. Their presence alone was enough to keep peace. No one dared to test them anymore, not because they feared destruction, but because they respected what those ships represented. In time, even the children born on distant worlds began to know Earth not as a blue planet, but as a symbol, a story passed down like legend. They were told about the time when humans were sold broken ships, laughed at, and betrayed, and how instead of seeking revenge, they built something stronger than any weapon, Unity. One evening, aboard the original Dreadnought, now a museum orbiting Mars, a group of children from different species gathered for a school trip. They stood before the massive hull, wide-eyed with wonder. Their teacher, an old human woman with kind eyes, told them softly, "This is where it began. This ship carried the hope of a planet, and that hope changed the galaxy." A small alien child raised its hand and asked, "Did they win?" The teacher smiled. They didn't need to win. They just refused to give up. Outside the viewport, the stars shimmered like scattered diamonds. The Dreadnought floated in silence, its name barely visible but still proud, a symbol of how far a determined species could rise when everyone else doubted them. And somewhere beyond those stars, countless explorers, human and alien, worked side by side, searching for new worlds. They carried no flags of conquest, only the desire to learn and grow. Humanity had finally found its true place among the stars. Not above others, not below them, but beside them as equals. The galaxy would never forget how it all began. From rusted scraps to a fleet of legends, from isolation to unity, from fear to respect. And in every corner of that vast universe, when someone looked up at the night sky, they whispered the same simple truth that echoed through history. They sold us rusted battleships, but now they bow before humanity's dreadnoughts.